Greetings and welcome back once again. This is I'm doing it again, y'all. Praise be to the Creator for another day of life. Arrived from the router trying to do the most, waiting for this customer who has yet to show up. So I pray everybody's doing well. We haven't had one of these straight up Soulonomics talks in a while. I said, you know what, Amuna, my spirit is being led. I've done them so much in times past that you gotta let it breathe. You know what I mean? So I pray everybody's doing well. Welcome to the conversation. It's just gonna be one of those, what's on your mind? Do you have something on your mind that you would like to talk? My finger is like right in the camera. Do you have something on your mind that you would like to talk about? Questions that you will make to ask, statements that you want to make? Feel free to do so at this time. In the meantime, I'm gonna go ahead and read this story. I like stories. If you haven't been able to tell, I'm going to read the story while we're waiting, about the fox without the tail. I often make reference to it, but this fox without the tail is a lot. These fables, not only just Aesop's fables, but proverbial sayings. I forgot to see if you guys can hear me. You should be able to hear me. These sayings are around because they are the wisdom of humanity. No matter what, if you're a person like me who likes proverbs, you'll see the proverbs from different cultures, from the continent, European, South American. All of these different cultures have proverbs. That is their wisdom that's wrapped up into the saying. Yeah. Wisdom is principle, therefore get wisdom, and with all you get understanding. So if you put your mind towards wisdom and understanding, which comes in the future, you can be able to decipher what you see. Sometimes we get confused because people are shim-shamming us, right? It's the blind leading the blind. And the reason why the blind is able to lead the blind, which would be the person that's following, is because the person who's following is blind. And why are we blind in this day and time? Because either we're blind by our desires, we're blind, not just physically, we're spiritually blind, emotionally blind, mentally blind. And therefore, those people who are spiritually, emotionally, and mentally blind can lead us because they appeal to us, right? So before I go any further, I want to read Aesop's fable because I make mention to this oftentimes. Show in reading view. I don't know if you guys could see this. What did they mean, show in reading view? Oh no, I don't want you to show in reading view. So I'm going to go ahead and read it. It's short. Okay, the fox without the tail. I don't know how many people remember this, but a fox that had been caught in a trap. Let's listen. Succeeded at last after much painful tugging in getting away, but he had to leave his beautiful bushy tail behind him. For a long time, he kept away from the other foxes, for he knew well enough that they would all make fun of him and crack jokes and laugh behind his back. But it was hard for him to live alone, and at last he thought of a plan that would perhaps help him out of his trouble. He called a meeting of all the foxes, saying that he had something of great importance to tell the tribe. I'm withholding my desire to ad lib because I'm going to come back. When they were all gathered together, the fox without a tail got up and made a long speech about all those foxes who had come to harm because of their tails. This one had been caught by hounds when his tail had become entangled in the hedge. That one had not been able to run fast enough because of the weight of his brush. Besides, it was well known that he said that men hunt foxes simply for their tails, which they cut off as prizes of the hunt. With such proof of the danger and uselessness of having a tail, said Master Fox, he would advise every fox to cut it off if he valued life and safety. When he had finished talking, an old fox arose and said, smiling, Master Fox, kindly turn around for a moment, and you shall have your answer. When the fox without a tail turned around, there arose such a storm of jeers and hooting that he saw how useless it was to try any longer to persuade the foxes to part with their tails. And you know, Aesop always has the moral of the story. Do not listen to the advice of him who seeks to lower you to his own level. How many people have remembered that story? The fox without the tail. We are in a space, in today's space and time, where, and we're going to go back now, and you let me know what you got from it. He had been caught in a trap. Personal situations that happen in our lives that compromise us in a way, emotionally, mentally, physically. If you were abused, if your mama got cheated on, if the melanated person, the black man who you chose or the black woman who you chose did you wrong, you put it on everybody, right? And he struggled. That means it was a hard situation. It was a problem. It was an issue in your life. And he struggled. And at last, after much painful tugging in getting away, you finally got beyond the situation, but it was still in you. And the scars of that situation is on you. He had to leave behind the trust he used to have. He, the fox, left behind his tail. But in this case, people leave behind the trust. They leave behind the hope in the community. Let's use the so-called black community as an analogy, right? So because the community, any community, church, whatever, relationships, okay? So you struggle to get away, but you still have the pain and you have the scars of not being able to be intact. You're still scarred. For a long time, he kept away. You went to isolation. You isolated yourself from the group because you felt deficient, right? Because he says, for he knew that they would make fun of him. Oh, you got played. Oh, you a sucker. Oh, you a single mother. Oh, he left you out here. Oh, they kicked you out. Whatever happened, whatever that traumatic situation, in this case, it was the fox who got caught in a trap. Keep in mind, right? So you playing all of these scenarios in your head. This is going to happen. That's going to happen. At the basis of it, it's a fear of not being accepted, right? But it was hard to live alone. You ain't got nobody to talk to. We tired of running through the same scenario in our head. So we want to go growing the Jew. We want to join the group, right? We want to go back into civilization, into society, but on our own terms, right? So he came up with a plan, came up with a YouTube channel, came up with a Twitter account, came up with an Instagram, came up with a Facebook post. You come up with a plan to say, hey, I'm injured in this way. I don't want to deal with my own injury. I want to attract other people who that the person can convince to cut their tail off. So you call a meeting, you press live, right? I'm here, I pressed live. I'm not trying to convince anybody to cut off their tail. It's just watching and seeing what's going on is an awareness that people are out here really convincing people to cut off their tail. Because you divested, you want other people to divest. Because you gave up, you want other people to give up. Because you didn't find somebody who is good, you want everybody else to think that there's nobody who's good out there. All of this stuff is happening because you left organized religion. The person must leave organized religion. Fill in the blank. Fill in whatever your blank is. So you call a meeting. And hear ye, everybody come round, right? When they were all gathered together, the fox without a tail got up and made a long speech about those foxes who have come to harm because of this is the cautionary tale about this person. And this is the cautionary tale about that person. And this person got a man and she was. So what happens is we confirm our bias by attracting to ourselves all of the stories that confirm what we already feel and think. We have to be careful of these things. We do it subconsciously. Some people do it consciously, that they may find other stories that may not agree with their narrative, but I'm not going to put in that because then somebody might think such and such, and it's going to lead them off the path. Truth is, you put it all on the table, even if it doesn't fit your agenda, and let the person sort it out themselves. Or you have the discussions through which the uncomfortable parts so that you can come to an understanding using critical thinking and analysis, as opposed to emotionally evoking fear or doubt or whatever it is to make the people think that the world is terrible out there. And if they don't subscribe to this ideology or thought processes, doom and gloom. This is what's happening in some toxic spaces. Especially, I've been on YouTube. That's why I took the ultimate break from YouTube, because there's a lot of toxicity. There's a lot of positivity, but there's also a lot of toxicity. And sometimes, because I have a mind that I'll be trying to understand, sometimes I stick around long enough and I'll be like, what's going on, India? What's going on, TJ? Welcome to the discussion. We're here to try to share the story. TJ says, hey, Shalom, what's going on, Kaya? I completely understand and agree. Shalom. So now that we're on the same, let's get back to the Fox. Share your thoughts. Now I know why I take like 3-month and 6-month breaks off the tube, man. Because you go down these rabbit holes and you wonder, how did I get here? The blind leading the blind. And then I'm like, I got to go back into real life and do real things. I mean, I don't know. But anyway, where are we up to now? So he says he called a meeting of all the foxes, saying that he had something of great importance to tell the tribe. Hey, tribe. Hey, whatever. Right? And the tribe has to go to a certain degree on the groupthink. And the groupthink is, well, as long as you think as we think, then that's cool. If you don't think as I think, and I see that in a lot of channels now, they're like, I'm trying to enlighten you. I'm trying to put you on game. And then somebody dissents and they start attacking them. I'm like, well, I just thought you said you were trying to enlighten the masses. Why are you attacking? Because somebody doesn't agree. That those two thoughts are incongruent. If they don't agree, let's have a conversation. Like over here, we're talking to John. Shout out to you. He doesn't agree. I don't want to attack you. I'm trying to figure out where you're coming from, because my objective is understanding. I'm not trying to win people to this side or that side, right? But when you are trying to corral the people in a certain way, then it threatens the agenda if somebody dissents and you don't, put them in their place. I'm like, anyway, everybody has different objectives, and I understand that. But sometimes it's just too much. So where are we? So he's like, yo, I got something to tell y'all. Jump on this live, press like, share, do all that stuff. I'm about to break it down for y'all, right? So everybody jumps on like, what we got now? So this is his first time unveiling his master plan. So check it out. When they were all gathered together, the fox was like, yo, we got enough people. We got 1,000 people in the spot. All right, boom, I'm going to drop it on you. Ready? Remember, he was already injured. Remember, he was already isolated. Remember, he already came up with this manipulative plan. Okay, keep that in mind. The fox without the tail got up, and he made this long speech about those foxes who come to harm because of their tails. Yeah? So he was like, yo, y'all don't know, when you get with the so-called black man or the black woman, your life is going to be ba, 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 and this, that. So, and people who are like on the fringe is like, well, that's not my life, man. You don't know what you're talking about. All other stories don't matter except for this narrative that's running. And the narrative is that running is to support the end game. This is why I like to sometimes ask people, yo, what's your objective? What is your end game? When we don't know end game, we have to sit around and listen long enough, like the elder in this story, to find out what this person is really driving at, right? Anywho, so then he was like, yeah, you don't want to tell, you know what I mean? You don't want a man, you don't want a woman you don't want this, because look, all this other bad stuff is happening. You don't want that. In all reality, the person doesn't have that. So the person who doesn't want children try to convince you not to have children, right? Oh, the person who doesn't want to breastfeed is going to try to, this actually happened to me. There's a story on my channel from a long time ago. The person who didn't want to breastfeed is going to try to convince you not to breastfeed, right? It goes on and on. The person who doesn't want natural hair is going to try to convince you not to have natural hair, right? But in this situation, we try to influence each other for good and for evil. In this situation, it was manipulation for evil, because now he wants them to maim himself so that he doesn't feel so isolated and outside of the tribe, right? So we can tell people influence people all the time. Yeah, you have plenty of positive stuff on here. Teach you how to buy a house, pay off your debt, build your credit. Beautiful channels on here. They're trying to influence you based on their experience on how to succeed and do things. Other people are on here trying to influence you to not get what it is that they don't have. So there's some people are here are the fox. So anyway, so he goes, this one had been caught up by the hounds. This one had his tail become entangled in the hedge. That one had been not been able. So, this, like I said before, this one had, been left with the 4 children. And these are all real stories, because some of the stuff that the fox is saying is real and present. Some people wasn't able to run fast enough. Some people were manipulated. But his conclusion, he has to use some type of truths. That's what sucks us in with falsehood, is because you have to put some truth in there. It's like the nasty stale bread at the supermarket. There's wheat in there, but there's all these other stuff to preserve it. If you notice, the real fresh bread at the supermarket, they don't keep on them shelves because it doesn't have the artificial additives and preservatives to keep it in an unnatural state. So even though it has wheat and it has grain in there, it has other things. Don't let me go into that whole food side that preserves it unnaturally. So think of truth in that way, that when people are speaking, there has to be kernels of truth. But what type of toxic additives and preservatives are they putting in there to present to you? That's the question we should ask, right? Or one of them anyway. Anywho, so he's breaking down some truths, but listen to his conclusion. Besides, it was well known. So he's gonna give you some fake facts. He's gonna give you some fake stats. He's gonna cook the books with the numbers, right? You know what I mean? Every 70%, all out of context, right? All the people know 99.9%, like he giving the paternity test results, right? This is what he's gonna do. This is what he's doing. This is why it agitates me to no end when I'm like, ugh. And then when you want to go into the actual and factuals, people get quiet. It's a snooze fest. Why? Because we want to be titillated. We want to be excited. We want our emotions to be played with because it makes us feel alive and present, right? Hype. We like the hype. We love the hype. We love the hype. Anyway, so now he gives a fake fact. Besides, it is well known, he said, that men hunt foxes simply for their tails. They were hunting foxes for their tails, right? Which they cut off as prizes of the hunt. But that's not why you lost your tail. So you give a truth, you contort the truth, right? To try to convince the person. That's not how you lost your tail. And you're alive. So critically thinking, we're like, well, wait a minute. Yeah, all of this is true, but let's continue. With such proof of the danger and uselessness of having a tail, said Master Fox, he would advise every fox to cut it off if he valued life and safety. So listen to the conclusion. He gives you a false dichotomous, a scenario of which you should choose between life and liberty and safety and your tail. Think about how many times we sat through some stuff. I have sat through some stuff this week. I'm like, why am I doing it to myself? I better go read my school book, y'all. Right? So he's advising, like, if you want this, then you should do this. But he's not telling you what's the real truth behind what he's saying, why he's saying. Anywho, because he wants to come back amongst everybody, and he doesn't want to be chastised. He doesn't want to be alienated, right? He says, when he had finished talking, an old fox arose. Somebody with wisdom, somebody who could see, an old fox who'd been around the block a little bit. He didn't jump on him. He didn't attack him. It said he was smiling. The old fox is like, I hear what you're saying, right? I hear what you're saying. But I got one request for you. Do me a favor. Turn around for a moment. He said, Master Fox kindly turn around for a moment. He even gave him the Master Fox title. He was like, Master Fox. See, the most gregarious one, the most exalted, fantabulous of all. Stand up for me. Turn around. Meaning something is going, when people are coming from somewhere, you got to be like, where are you coming from with this? What is the thought behind this energy that you're coming with? That would help us to understand, instead of fighting, you notice the Master Fox also, the old fox didn't fight all of the information that he gave to bolster his argument. He didn't fight those things. Hold on one second. Welcome to everybody who just joined us. The Master Fox didn't fight those things. He didn't even waste his time with all of these little bullet points. What he did was, he wanted to, and some people will say, oh, he's looking at the messenger and not the message. But sometimes you have to look at the messenger. Because if the message don't sound too right, and the message sounds tainted, the message sounds artificially constructed, you have to be like, wait a minute. It's like, those little junk mails. I have some mails here. You have some little junk mails that come, right? And they look all professional. They got the stamp on there. They have your name, and they look like a check is in there. And you got to look real good. Now you start examining the messenger, because this don't look right. The other day, my mother said, "Is this a junk mail or is this real?" I'm like, "That's a junk mail," because they'll make it look all professional to convince you. So the Master Fox, he was like, "Let me examine this person, because this ain't sounding too right." And when the fox turned around, everybody realized where this was coming from. Don't listen to the advice of him who seeks to lower you to his own level. You won't know the level of the person um, unless you take a moment to find out, unless you take a moment to inquire, or unless you're patient enough for them to talk out a multitude of words. Sin is not far, right? So you patient enough to let them talk out the whole thing. And then you get to say, aha, this is why you're stuck on this topic. This is why you won't. That moment happened to me today. I guess that's what the moral of the story is. I'm listening and I'm trying to figure out, well, where's this person coming from and why are they stuck in this space? And then it came out and I was like, the fox doesn't have a tail. The fox doesn't have a tail. My head wrap is a little crook. Hold on. I keep hitting it up the top of the thing. The fox doesn't have a tail. And sometimes we will find ourselves listening to, ingesting, being polluted by, being led astray by people's thoughts and ideology, because they're not coming forward and saying, hey, this is my thesis. This is where I'm anchored in. This is where I am, and this is where I'm trying to take you. They don't come like that. Especially here, you get a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and then you're like following the little pieces until you're like, wait a minute. That happened to me really years ago on YouTube, years. So I'm on the spiritual, like trying to understand. And when people are spitting some stuff where that sounds like plausible, I'm like, okay, let me give them the benefit of the doubt. I'm sitting there listening to a number of videos. I think I told this story before. And when the person got to the end of the video series, two major things happened. I noticed every time I was listening to it, I kept falling asleep. Although I was interested in the material, every time I kept listening, I kept falling asleep. I was like, that's very weird. Like, this thing is putting me out. The second thing that happened is that the time I got to the end of this video series, this person has a whole agenda. This person is into some whole occult type, but the information wasn't about that. The information was about relationships. The information was about self-improvement. The information was about all of these things, but the agenda was hidden. They waited till they fed you all of these little morsels, and then when you got to the end, they want to ultimately cut your tail off. So we have to be careful in this day and age, because in this space for acquisition of knowledge, we have to make sure that we move through this information with wisdom, right? And if somebody is speaking to your pain constantly, your sore spot, and every day you log on, it's more about this pain and that pain and another example and another example, another example, ultimately, and you're only eating that's like eating junk food every day. There's no progress. How are you going to progress? How are you going to get to the next phase? How are you going to get beyond it? How are you going to heal? There's no call to action. Where is the call to action? What is your objective? Why is my head wrap leaning to the side, people? It's leaning to the side, or is it the camera? It looks weird. Let me know your thoughts on that. That's my thoughts on the fox without a tail. We can definitely take a lot from some of these proverbial sayings and the things that were left in people's experiences, because people really don't change. Human behavior, it kind of remains the same. The more we learn about ourselves is the more we learn about human behavior. And what happens is the more people feed into it and people begin to feel untouchable, is the more they expose themselves, right? Is the more the emperor doesn't have on any clothes. And when you get into a feedback loop where no one can say, hey, the emperor doesn't have on any clothes, you know that you're in trouble. There may be people around you who want to say and know to say, hey, you know, that's wrong. Like I heard something, I said it here the other day, but it troubled me so much, where the person said that they were toxic and also said that they were healing. And I'm like, those two don't go together. When you're toxic, you're not healing. When you begin to detox, starts the healing process. And so, are we all listening to this with our ears open? Zimrai says, good to see you conversing with us again. It made me feel like always enjoy your positive vibration and silence now. It made me feel like I ran away. Yeah, I had to like turn off the camera for a little bit. And I told you guys I started back school to finish up some stuff I didn't finish before I started my journey, right? And so it is an adjustment. So you see me off camera a lot. It's just a lot going on. I'm readjusting. I have a lot of reading to do. I mean, let me just say, I'm glad I only took 2 classes. Let me just say that. I'm glad I only took 2 classes. So I take a lot of that energy, and like right now I got to go read a lot of chapters. But it's giving me a lot of information. It's good to see you too. It's good to see you. It's good to see you. The reading though, I'm taking an American history class from 1877 to present. And the reading, let me share guys with a little bit. The reading, I know, right? Kate, Shane, I messed around with it for a long time. When I left over 20 years ago, I know I still don't look it. But when I left, I was like, I need to finish up. And then life happened, and life happened, and life happened, and life happened. And I was going to start back last year. And I'm like, that didn't happen. So this year, I'm like, yo, I'm going to do it. Right. So I start off with the 2. I say I'm going to pay as I go, because I looked at that financial aid. I'm like, y'all are tripping. Right. And so these 2 classes, one is public speaking and one is, and I'm like, I got that. The only thing with the public speaking is I public speak all the time, but y'all already know my memory. I'll be forgetting people's names. I'm like, this is a long speech to memorize. I'm going to need like 50 flashcards. So I have a speech to deliver tomorrow, and I'm over here talking on YouTube. Y'all already know how it is. But I need, this space still helps me to just unwind a little bit. But sometimes, you know how it is. It's good to be back. What was I going to say? Yeah, so, hopefully everybody has their part to play. Hopefully these type of discussions help us to not be afraid to unpack information, not be afraid if somebody doesn't agree with you. Like I lost some subscribers, long-time subscribers, because now they didn't like me going to the other side of the tracks, what they feel is the other side of the tracks, and giving. Let me fix my scarf real quick. Let me put the cam off so I can fix my scarf, y'all, because the scarf is bothering me. The scarf is bothering me. Hold on. It's all loose and crazy looking. So some people don't like when when we have to examine the other part of the conversation. And even though it's uncomfortable, I understand it's uncomfortable, but with all due respect, how can we not? I wanted to come on here and talk about, all right, let's see if I fixed it better here. I wanted to come on here and talk about critical race theory, because just really the reactions of it. I'm listening to the woman who they said coined the term, and I'm listening to the objections, and I'm listening to a whole lot of the stuff, and I just find it interesting where the people are split and what the fear is, because a lot of the times when we behave in a certain way, it's because of fear, right? And fear is an emotion, and we know that emotions block our logical thought processes, right? And so this is what we're seeing. I think it's political. A lot of it is political, but it's just interesting to hear people, like a man, he was arguing against it but couldn't define it. I was like, why do we keep arguing for and against things that we can't define, but then think it's very elementary to define things? Definitions are at the very basis of our communication. And if we can't define it or are unwilling to do so, like feminism, trigger word. I'm against feminism. Okay, what is it? If you're for it, please define it. If you're against it, please define it. Critical race theory, what is it? If you're for it, please define it. And people say stuff like, well, basically. No, not basically. What is it? Because if we can't talk about what is it, how do we move forward? How? How, Sway? How? 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 So, there's a lot going on. How are you guys doing? Anything else you want to talk about? The what did they name? What did they name? What we've been watching? What's the video? Color Purple. Color Purple has been interesting. I think we have some denial or some desire to not acknowledge other people's experiences. And when it is done to us, we're like, oh, this is so unjust. But we do it. This type of issue that's happening with the man and the woman is similar to the issue that happens between races or different cultures. But only when we are on the receiving end is it unjust. But when we are on the giving end, then it is what it is. Unjust weights and balances, right? And so that's what we're seeing when now the women are coming forward. That's what I wanted to talk about, but I don't know how particularly I would do it. I have the Ike Turner. Maybe I have to come back. I found the Ike Turner reference that I was talking about yesterday during the broadcast. That yeah, the movie is good. The movie is interesting. The book is interesting. We see something yesterday. We came across Celie having these inordinate feelings, these misapplied feelings towards the woman, Miss Shug, because of what the book is saying, the hurt that she received from men. And so in her mind, because she's not afraid of women, she's putting the emotions that are intended for men towards women. And so I think that's where some of the part was missed. She said it earlier on, and now it's manifesting. And we're seeing that's manifesting. Look, John coming up in the house. John is like, what's going on in here? Una talking again without me. It's not, it doesn't make it right. But it gives you an understanding of, in today's space and time, where a lot of the young women are taking what belongs to a relationship between a man and a woman and taking that energy and putting it towards the same sex. And you're like, what? But yet still, not only are they doing that, but they're still looking for the traditional energetic gender roles to be there, which is to show you that something, so basically one becomes more masculine and one becomes more feminine in both cases. What are your thoughts on that? So you're still looking for the same energy, but you don't trust the actual gender that it's coming from. So you rather synthesize it in a scenario that you feel that you can control. And what's funny, it's not funny, but what is something that I shouldn't say funny, the word I should say is what's ironic is that there also is a lot of domestic violence and of domestic abuse in those type of situations, where one assumes the masculine and the other assumes the feminine, and then they have this domestic battle for control and power in these positions. So yes, Celie goes off the rails in trying to check for Suge Avery, and kind of jealous. They bring her in kind of like this sister wife type of vibration. I thought that was interesting. And gets kind of jealous because Suge is not that on that kind of time. If you remember the backside, if you remember the review about Seeking Sister Wife, when we had shout out to, oh gosh, see, I told y'all, Father help me. When we had Ari on the show, she mentioned something similar in the fact that, and if you the guys didn't see Seeking Sister Wife, you got to click the link, but in the fact that Ashley, who was helping to bring in women into the household, had feelings for the other woman, which is Ari. And because Ari wasn't on that time, Ashley kind of felt away. So we have these misplaced feelings and emotions that we take from the intended partner and put in the wrong places so that we can potentially feel, not we, because I'm not in, that people can potentially feel safe. The mistrust is placed in the gender instead of the individual. Yes. So instead of that person violated you, you say, I'm afraid of this gender. Because that woman broke your heart, you're afraid of all black women. Or because you think one white person did something good for somebody, then all, this is what we do, and that's sweeping generalization. Those are the errant thoughts that we go into when people use these logical fallacies to reason with their reality. John, it is too early. John, come with the mom. Where is the John? You must miss me. John, I have a lot going on, John. Listen to Judge Joe Brown on Spotify. No, Ike and Tina. I told you I have Ike and Tina. You're gonna make me have to get Ike and Tina. It's on the cell phone. It's on the cell phone. This is the people who are in this documentary is his daughter. The people who are in this documentary is the woman who was in the Ike and Tina review, like the people who, and I think it's his band member. So the people who are in this documentary that is testifying to Ike's condition, they are the people who are like around him. um Kai Shane says you are on point. Isn't that because of the lack of connection to the parent, the mom and dad? Which point? Which one? Refresh my memory. Y'all know sometimes when I have these talks, my mind be like, whoop, 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 whoop. I be dotting across the landscape. There's a lot of things come because we have an issue, a poor connection with our mother and father. Um, Let me talk to this one first. There are a lot of things. Yeah, distrusting gender. It could It could come from the extended family. It could come from bad experiences. It can come from a number of places of gender distrust, right? But when the person, like she said in the book, she said, for instance, what's her name? Sophia has gender mistrust. She doesn't want to let go of her maternal family. She wants to make sure she still has the connection. She wants to bring Harpo in on her time. Something manifest that she thought would, so she knew that she had to fight, and now it's like ultimately it came to her doorstep and she's fighting in her own home. And so you see that mistrust there, and you see her refusal to relinquish. He said he can't get her to mind because she refuses to relinquish control because she doesn't trust. The reason why you don't want to relinquish control is because you don't trust the person to do right by you. And so, yes, that does come a lot of times from childhood. And we take those disappointments or those misappointments or those heartbreaks, and we take it and we put it on the mate. Sometimes we take it and expect the mate to correct the wrong that the father or the mother or the uncle or the brother has done. And that issue becomes the mate wasn't even there. They didn't create the issue. And it kind of puts a weight and a burden on the relationship to expect them to fix something that they didn't break. And oftentimes we go into relationships like that, and then it falls apart, and then we say everybody's jacked up, not looking at yourself in the mirror, asking, what did I come with? What were my expectations? What pressures did I put on this relationship? How was it built? How was it founded? A lot of times we don't do those things. We just come and point the finger at the other person and expect them to. One of the things that's troubling, and I'm going to come to what John said, but one of the things that's troubling is that on one hand, there are people out here propagating the thought process that melanated men are, or black men are not this and not that and not all of these things. On the other hand, that shows that you expect them to be this and that and all these things. And I have to just say that men are human and women are human. And some of the expectations that we put on people are beyond human. And also some of the expectations that we have for them are the things that we should be doing. Right? So that's I don't want to go. Let's say, who are these people denying that the abuse happens? Plenty of them, John. Everybody, a lot of people are denying. The Color Purple is an intention of the author is to perpetuate a false narrative. What if that was her narrative? What if we talk to her and she says, you know what, that was her experience? Because I was reading, I went to go back and read her bio, and it says something to the degree that she was married twice, and that she claimed she had a relationship with Tracy Chapman, the singer, who didn't confirm it. I was like, well, that's weird. Celie in the book is a little bit off, and she's attracted to a singer. And this woman here is saying the same thing. Alice Walker is her name. So I was like, that's a bit weird, and it lines up a little bit. So again, she may have been My apologies. For some reason, it kicked me out. Let me know if you're still here. Um, so yes, a lot of our gender distrust, a lot of our people distrust, a lot of those things are coming from our very formative years, 0 to 7, 7 to 14. If you want to know, somebody's just telling you all about how everybody's off and bad is not going to fix you. It's not going to find you what you're looking for. It's not going to make your path rosier. You know what I mean? So to identify that there is yeah, the stream kicked out and came back in. My apologies. To identify that there are issues and troubles within the in the community, that's necessary. But to stay there is not going to fix the issues that remain in the community. It's just not, or any community. Yep, unhealed trauma. Do you know that the movie made to make black men falsely appear to be incompetent, degenerate, abusive, untrustworthy, and horrible to black women so that black women won't trust us? And the question I asked John is that if this movie, I went back and looked, the movie's made, I mean, the book is written in 1982, okay? The movie is made in 1985. Are we to believe before 1982 and 1985, no woman, melanated woman, thought that the man was incompetent, degenerate, abusive, untrustworthy, and horrible to black women? If we're going to say that this, because say we're in court, right? John is arguing the fact that this movie, he wants reparations because this movie is the sole cause for the lowering of the esteem of the melanated man in society, right? He's going to prove this point. John, I really want you to prove this point. Let's prove the point. So you have to be able to prove that before this point in time, before 1982, that this thought process did not exist. And when we look at, and I even showed it on this channel, when we look at Amos and Andy, that's 1950s. The show been running since like 1930s to 1960. When we look at what's happening now, Roger's mother was a single mother. When we look at the blaxploitation films in the 1970s, right? When we look at Claudine, when we look at all of these films, there was when we look at the pimp era, I was going to do some information on the documentary that Iceberg Slim wrote. He wrote a book. He was a pimp. This is all happening before 1982. I find it very difficult to believe, right? We argue in this case that a book in 1982, like Back to the Future, changed the minds of all of these people retroactively. How, Sway? How? Anybody want to talk? Let me put the link in the box. And then I'm going to go practice my little speech. Oh, no. Wait a minute. Oh, no, wait. I put the wrong link. Wrong link. So if we're going to prove that, this is part of my issue. It's like feminism broke up the black family. Okay. What part of feminism? What year was this? Who was at who was the spearhead of this? What happened before this? What was the state of the black family? If the Monahan report comes out in 1965-ish, I think, and the Monahan report is pointing the finger at the black woman, the matriarch of the family, how then could feminism, who pushes forward after the civil rights, be the cause of the breaking up of the black family when the Monahan report is having this conversation before feminism really goes full-fledged and they're burning bras? The timeline don't add up. The math ain't mathing. No, he says, for the overwhelming majority of black women never believe that black men condoned abuse. We have to be able to prove that. And it makes sense. You find difficult all the things you mentioned were created by white supremacist media. So now we get to move the goalposts, John. We move the goalposts from Alice Walker and her book, The Color Purple, and we go to the white supremacist media. Instead of admitting that, you know what, there is a possibility and a high probability that in some spaces, melanated men were abusing and exploiting the bodies, the labor, and the existence of black women. Again, if you watch that Billie Holiday movie, she was getting kicked. She married, I forget who she married. The dude had her on the floor, kicking her in the belly in front of all of these people. That's what year? The early 20s, early 1900s? Everybody talking about Sojourner Truth. Y'all wasn't checking for Sojourner Truth. Sojourner Truth had to ask you, ain't I a woman? Y'all wasn't checking for Sojourner. This is not to say man against woman. It's to be honest. Sometimes it's difficult to look ourselves in the mirror and say, yes, I did this thing. Yes, I represent a group of people who have done this thing. Like we went through the domestic violence. There were people doing it in a time where nobody was going to hold you accountable for doing it, because the other people were doing it. So it became normalized. Like giving babies cough medicine with cocaine in it. There was a time in this country that doctors prescribed medicine with heroin, and you could have ordered heroin in the Sears and Roebuck's catalog. Anybody look that up? Y'all want to look that up? Where you could have ordered highly addictive drugs through the mail. Through the mail. Sears and Roebuck. So at that time, when the authorities and the officials didn't think anything was wrong with it, people did it. So if you lived in a time where beating your wife was good for good measure, slapping her with a stick that's smaller than your thumb was just for good weather, yeah, those were some real drugs. One of the conversations about why they banned marijuana in the early 1900s, there's a documentary called I think it's like Illegal Drugs and How They Got That Way, something to that degree. And they did a wild smear campaign on melanated men, saying that they were raping European women and they were smoking marijuana, and this is why they needed to ban marijuana. So when you look at a time, when you look at the time when things were acceptable and was done in the open, there was no need to hold these people accountable. So we can't say at the same time that it was the norm and at the other same time it wasn't happening. If it was the norm, you're almost guaranteed that it was happening. The entire concept of white feminism, as Shahrazad, I don't know why I can't, Shahrazad Ali said that white feminism was a white woman's issue. And even Sojourner Truth called out the feminists. Maybe we'll come back again. The early feminists were fighting for what, and what? What were the early feminists fighting for? When did they begin? Like, what's her name? Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Canton. I just read about them, right? These were they were fighting for suffrage, the suffrage movement, the right to vote. They were fighting for the abolition of slavery. I don't hear anybody talking about how early feminism fought for the abolition of slavery. Who wants to have that conversation? Before we get to present day and mess all of, I'm not caping for no feminists. What I'm saying is my pet peeve is when we use talking points out of context. That makes my head wrap go crooked, and that's probably why my head wrap's crooked now. Talking points out of context just do something to me. They never did anything for black women. Who? Bruh. Voting rights. Yep. They were suffrage movements. They were fighting for prohibition because people was getting beat up in their house. And they were petitioning for the abolition of slavery. This is before 1830s. Let's look, before we go to what's happening now about who never did what for black people, let's go back in history. Who was at the forefront of the abolitionist movement? Who kept fighting for the abolition of slavery? Why did slaves stop being allowed to be imported to America? Why is this important? It's important because as we progress, we begin to understand what held, what morphed, who was doing it, who was pushing behind it, and why. Now, later, what it becomes, then we can have that conversation. But if we say these people never did anything, and it's like, well, wait a minute. Well, who was hiding you on the Underground Railroad? Hmm? Who was writing these freedom passes that you used to escape to the North? Who was going before Congress and petitioning? Who was selling alphabet spellers in their sewing groups and coming together? I'm not caping, but history is history. If we don't want other people changing history to suit them, then we can't do it because it makes us feel better. Let's bring some of the facts, drop some in the box. We can have that conversation, John. We could have that conversation because there were also those, they had the white feminists and they had the black feminists at that time. They weren't necessarily called feminists, right? When they had that Seneca conference, that was later on though. The Seneca conference was later on. No, Muna, that conference was later on. If we're talking about before this, we're talking about the early 1800s. Are we aware that the Quakers are the ones that told the Europeans, let me fix my thing again. The Quakers are the ones that told the Europeans, don't do this as it related to slavery. Are we aware of that? And they told them what would happen if you tried to do what they were doing. How many people bring up the Quakers in their conversation? How many people bring up the Quakers, that many of the Quakers were abolitionists? Not caping, but if we're going to go back and talk about history, we can't just change it because if it suits us, can we? I'm sorry, y'all. I'm fixing my little unruly head wrap. I command thee to stay still today. I keep moving my head and it's just flicking all over the place. Right? And I know then this is not the part that we want to hear. We want to hear that nobody helped us, but that's not true. It's easy to play the victim, to say nobody helped you. And then when you start asking questions, then people feel attacked. But the reality is there are plenty of people that helped. Hopefully it's going to stay this time. There are plenty of people that helped. And since the feminist movement is a sore space for a lot of people, if we go back, maybe I'll do that. Maybe we can go back, but not today because I got to go study the thing. But maybe we can go back and talk about the truth about what parts they helped in. What happened was that many of them felt an affinity to, not all, and a connection to the enslaved population because the patriarchal system was also oppressing them. And so they began to fight and pour their energy into this cause in hopes that when the slaves became free, they also will become free. This is funny, John. Just go on my channel, click the Lev Project. Take the next 3 months to go through all the material. Do your research. John is new. It's okay, John. He says, do your research on foundational Black American history, ma'am. Go to my channel. You're on it. Go to the Lev Project and click over, I don't even know how many videos on research on foundational Black American history. White feminists were doing nothing, he says, but send money for poor Black kids, Africa commercial cash grab during slavery abolishment. When they voted to stop importation of slaves from the continent, remember we went over the Zong massacre and how that played into the abolition of, not in this country, but to stop the importation, right? All of these little pieces work together to this whole picture. Now, I know it's shocking because John sounded a little like, ma'am, ma'am, why are we having this conversation, ma'am? But the reality is it doesn't do any good to deny. If it is so, it doesn't do us any good. It's history. We can't go back and change it. All we can do is either accept it, deny it, or learn from it. I wouldn't be saying this if I didn't have any information to substantiate it. I don't roll like that. So the reason that I'm saying it is because there's information to substantiate that these European women, namely Quakers, they were at the forefront of the abolition movement and the Underground Railroad. They were the ones, when you read the slave code, after I believe it's the Nat Turner Rebellion, if I'm not mistaken. And when they started putting these records on the books, not to teach slaves to read, who do you think they were talking to? That if they did, they would either be fined, thrown in jail, or lashed. Who do you think they were talking to? It wasn't, they weren't talking to the slave about not teaching other slaves to read. They were talking to the Europeans who would come trying to empower the enslaved individual. And those people were being threatened with fines and fees and everything else if they proceeded to try to teach slaves to read. White feminists were fighting for the rights for white women to be equal to white men, not for all women to be equal to white men. People, those white feminist ones, we jumping all over, John. That's another thing. I know it seems we got to stay, if we're going to make a point, right? We're going to say, this is the point we want to make. For me, in order to make progress, it's like, okay, this is what I want to prove, or this is what I want to disprove, or this is what I want to establish. But if we keep compounding the issue, everything gets lost. So the first issue, you said that the white feminists were not helping with the abolitionist movement, right? So then we have to either prove or disprove that. Zamara said, that's why you're the best. And when you tell these truths, we have to swallow and accept these truths, yeah. I mean, I do it with love, prayerfully, because it's hard, it's difficult, it's upsetting, it's off-putting, it's destabilizing, it challenges us. We have to be honest about what we're seeing and what we're looking at, right? But it's easier to say all people did this and all people did that. It's easier for us so that we don't have as much dissonance in our minds as we're trying to move forward. It's easy to say it's not true. It's another thing to prove it. I'm ready to prove it, John. The link is in the box. Or we could come back and have another time and space where we can present our argument. I use the word literally because I'm not arguing, you understand? But we could present our stance. You come and prove with sources and facts. Don't Shahrazad me talking about that's white people stuff. I need some sources, I need some citations, and I need some facts, okay, to prove that these Europeans did not aid in the abolition of slavery. And I'm asserting that what we're calling feminists, the first wave of these feminists, were instrumental in advocating for the abolition of slavery. That's what I'm asserting. And let me know clearly what you're asserting, and then we could just come with the citations. Like I said, don't Shahrazad me. We need citations, brother. We can't just say it's not true. Anywho, what time is it? I guess the customer has been tripping. I'm about to roll. She's like, oh my goodness, I forgot. It seems like you forgot again, customer lady. But I'm about to roll today. So yeah. So that's my thoughts on that. I don't know how I got over here. The fox without the tail. Yeah. So to tie it all back in, we just have to be careful of the fountains that we're drinking from. And I like John's pushback because he's not just be like, yeah, that's right, that's true. He has his thought process, he has his opinions, but hopefully he comes with some facts. We need some books, we need some articles, we need some references. You know what I mean? No, John. No. I'm not talking about what, that's not my argument. Let me say this, and for the whole of YouTube, what I'm asserting, what I said before, is that first wave feminists, including Quakers, advocated for the abolition of slavery. And I'm just going to put that there. They also advocated for certain rights for melanated people. I was just in the history class. I found it interesting. They gave the president, what's his name? Garfield. James Garfield, right? That's the one I picked to do the little review on. And what they killed him within, he got in office in March and they shot him in July. And he dies in, I think, September. Okay. He was advocating for um, rights for melanated people, because this is after slavery, right? This is in Reconstruction places. He's advocating for rights. He's advocating for certain things. And all of a sudden, he mysteriously gets shot, right, by a dude who was like, yo, I wanted you to win, but you didn't put me on. I forgot the name of the guy who shot him. You didn't put me on, and I wanted to win, and I wanted you to win. And so he shoots him twice. So what I'm noticing is that when you had one person who would come in and say, you know what, this thing is unjust, this thing is not right, the mass majority of the European ruling class came in and said, nah, we don't care if it's not just and not right. We're not going to allow you to do that. And in the same way things work here on YouTube, the voices of those who are saying, no, go the right path, do the right thing, are drowned out. And so history only records the voices of those who did the wrong. For us to think that every single European came and said to do the wrong thing, for us to think that, no, Kate, but that there's, I don't know how you get there. What happens is the louder voices are the ones that are being recorded. Just in the same way today, the louder voices, the raunchier platforms, the ones who are more leading, oftentimes people in crazy directions, they get more attention, right? They get more attention. It's not to say that the other people are not saying things that are right and exact. It's saying that the crowd is flowing towards that type of thought process. And so that's the top for another day. See, here we go with the statistics. You must have missed my 99.9% statistics. First wave feminists did not want slavery to end, along with 99% of the entire country. That's not true, brother. It's Abraham Lincoln. He didn't want the country to fall apart. He didn't want people seceding from the Union. But see, now you're going to after slavery. This is how we have conversations, and then people get to slippy, do the Tanya Harding on the ice. People get to slip slide. No, you throwing. It's like gumbo. I don't eat gumbo. You got crawdads, you got crab, you got all kind of stuff in the gumbo pot. I don't eat gumbo, brother. You putting too much stuff in the pot. You got sausage. I see this stuff on the Food Network. I'll be like, what are they making? You got too much stuff in the pot. The pot is polluted. One pot at a time. One pot at a time. Either we're going to prove or disprove that they were instrumental in advocating for the abolitionists of slavery. Once we pass that point, we can go to the other stuff. But we need to hone in so that we don't get too confused. Anywho, anybody else have any questions or comments? Again, John, thank you for coming through, making it lively. We appreciate your input. Right? I hope when I come with my presentation, you ready with your presentation, so that we can, we get kind of triggered by this person said this person said that. Yeah, they said a lot of things. They said a whole lot of things. Some of the stuff I'm reading, I'm like, oh, what? You know what I mean? Like, they were tripping. But the reality is, the person oftentimes who's the most, the thing that they say that's the most vile, yeah, they wanted rights for themselves. I didn't say they didn't, but to say that they didn't advocate for the abolition of slavery, we have to prove that. You had a guy, what was his name? Oh, y'all making me go back in my memory. The one who wrote what was the name of the book he wrote? Not the book. He ran, and Frederick Douglass came through and wrote some articles. Oh gosh, I got to dig back in my memory. He was one of the chief voices for the abolition of slavery. The Liberator, I think, was the name of the now y'all know I don't like bringing stuff up. Let me cite it. I think it was the Liberator. Hold on. Oh, his name is on the tip of my tongue. Hold on. Yep, his name was William Lloyd Garrison. It was the Liberator. The Liberator was a newspaper that ran from 1831 to 1865, right? This was a European man. Let me give you a little something of what I'm talking about. Not caping, but let's get the facts straight. That's all I'm saying. We get the facts straight and we can roll from there. William Lloyd Garrison was the guy's name. Okay? Come on, thing, open up for me. It says William Lloyd Garrison was born Okay, I don't know when it went off. It went off. Let me know where it went off at. I don't remember. I was reading from the Liberator. We'll probably come back another time. The guy's name was William Lloyd Garrison. It ran from 1831 to 1865. It was an abolitionist paper. Part of the reason why the laws against reading was heavy is because this type of contraband was being circulated. It printed stories about abolition, fighting for freedom. It printed all of these stories that at the time many people in the South found to be inflammatory and to pervert the good Negroes. So there's a lot to this story. To pretend that this stuff doesn't exist, come on, it wouldn't be right. It wouldn't be right to pretend this story didn't exist, because they do. It was a whole collaborative effort. It was a whole collaborative effort. Right as I began to read, oh, okay, let me just give the overview. The Liberator, 1831 to 1865, was a weekly abolitionist newspaper printed and published in Boston by William Lloyd Garrison through 1839 by Isaac Capp. Religious rather than political, it appealed to moral conscience of its readers, urging them to demand immediate freeing of slaves. It also prompted women's rights as an issue that split the abolitionist movement. Despite its modest circulation of 3,000, it had prominent and influential readers, including Frederick Douglass and Bera Green. If I'm not mistaken, it was William Lloyd Garrison that put Frederick Douglass on the speaking network. If I'm not mistaken, I don't think I'm mistaken. I would have to go back, but I think it was him who put Frederick Douglass on, and he took him to one of his first speaking engagement and had him testify about his life. Because what they will do is have these small meetings, and then they wanted to for the Europeans in the North to see how bad slavery was, because remember, this issue is splitting the country, and they wanted them to see how bad slavery was. So it's kind of like a testimonial, like it worked for me, or this is where I'm coming from. So they would bring people who came out of slavery and made their way to the North to speak to the people. And they would be like, wow, real life slave narrative. And this is where you see the birth of a lot of these slave narratives, like the ones we read here on this channel, because those slave narratives helped to show the conditions within slavery. Because what was happening is that a lot of people in the South were saying, oh, nothing is wrong, everybody is good, don't look down here, mind your business. So they needed material such as this. They needed information. They needed media to inform others of what was happening. Let me see women's rights advocacy. Let me see if it's still on. And y'all making me go into it now. women's rights advocacy in the Liberator, right? The Liberator also became an avowed women's rights newspaper. Remember, this is 18, what did I say? That these early feminists, so let's get it. I wish you could see it, but I don't know how to share my screen on this version. It says the Liberator also became an avowed women's rights newspaper when the prospectus for its 1838 issue declared that as the paper's objective was to redeem woman as well as man from servile to equal condition, end quote, it would support the rights of women to their utmost extent. In January and February of 1838, the Liberator published Sarah Grimke, that's the name of the lady, the Grimke sisters, Letters of Province of a Woman, and later that year published them as a book, using the reprint to call attention to another of Garrison Knapp's project, the Boston Female Anti-Slavery Society. Me done. Me not go no more. 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 My point being, let us be honest, authentic and true about what happened so that we can show up authentically in today's conversation about what is still happening. If we can't admit what happened then, and it wasn't even us, we for sure can't admit our wrongs today, right? So prayerfully, that helps somebody somewhere. I didn't even intend to stay this long, but oh no, John pulled me out today. We'll talk more about that. It's a little, I guess it's on topic, but we'll talk more about it in a little bit. Everybody like, subscribe, share. About to run inside and get on the road now because it's customer have me waste my time today. Let's have a little commercial break, shall we? This episode is sponsored by Yummy Curry Powder. Go on over to www.theyummycottage.com for your powder today. All right, everybody, we'll talk again soon. John, I hope that gave some information that you could go over and come back to the conversation, with some more, or anyone else who disagrees, who think feminism didn't do anything, first wave, second wave, no wave, and that if no one helped, then how did melanated people get out? Because what I realized about America, just going back over some of, like today I had to read back over World War I, they don't give no concessions unless they're in a very compromised situation. That's about the only time America give any concessions. The situation have to be dire. Women didn't get the right to vote across the nation until they over there hemmed up on the wall in World War I, and then they have no other way to turn, right? Until something terrible, they didn't come to myself and have a moral reasoning. The appeal to conscience doesn't seem to work here. It has to be something really extreme, and that's unfortunate. That was not the point, John. I didn't say that. I hear what you're saying, but they weren't doing it for the Southern European people. They were doing it at that time for the Northern people. And the people in England, when the slave trade, I think it was about 1807 or 8 is when they made it illegal to trade slaves across, to bring them from the continent. And once they made it illegal to bring them from the continent, that's when they started breeding to a certain degree to continue to produce for the machine, right? I think it's 1808. Now, man, I gotta go because every time I keep talking, then I gotta cite sources. Hold on one second. Is it 1808? Oh, Malika Minor work. Look at that. Slave Trade Act 1808, the act prohibiting importation of slaves of 1807, is a United States federal law that stated that no new slaves were permitted to be imported into the United States. It took effect in 1808. Oh, Malika Minor work. All right, boom. I didn't mislead you guys. Cool. Yeah, that was 1808. So all of these things were a petition. They didn't just get up on one day and say, you know what? I feel so bad, I don't want to import any more slaves. That is not what happened. They weren't like, oh, I feel so terrible. oh gosh, I think I'm going to give women the right to vote. That didn't happen. That wasn't happening, sir. That wasn't happening. He says, ma'am, foundational black Americans were beating the crap out of the slave masters. Sir, we don't want to go down this road with me. Sir, you're preaching to the choir. Like I said, click on the Left Project. For those who may not know, the Left Project was what, 2016? For a whole year. I was like, you know what? It's so terrible that we don't talk about, and it looks like that the issues that we have as a community is at the root. So hear me with my enough self. You know what we should do? We should take a whole year instead of every February complain about just 28 days of Black history. Let's look at the collective injury that we suffered as a people here in the Western Hemisphere and try to get some understanding, me with enough stuff, right? So then I invited people, please come through, let your voices be heard, because that's what Left Project is, lift every voice. Let your voices be heard. I need volunteers to read. Do you know, for the majority of the year, my poor little throat couldn't go no more. I ended up reading. And what we read, that thing I did the 4th of July, this is how I know all of that stuff, because that's what we were reading. We were reading Charles Ball's, we were reading about all kind of stuff. We were reading about incidents of the life of a slave girl. We were reading all that stuff. So when John says general things such as the Black Americans were beating the slave masters, this is a very general thing that was not happening across the board. It wasn't happening across the board. I know some people are like, oh, it wasn't happening across the board. We're going to have to be specific. There's a whole book that I have called Resistance, I think, in Slavery. I can see the book right now. It's a brownish orange cover, and it talks about all of the slave rebellions. But it was not across the board, people getting up every day, and it wasn't happening like the way we would want to reimagine it to happen for us to feel better. There were different ways that people rebelled, and it didn't all look the same way. I never told you they liked you. I never told you they liked you. I just told you that they participated in the abolitionist, the petitioning for the abolition of slavery. I didn't tell you that you was their best friend. I didn't say that. I just told you that they were instrumental. I just told you that. Did I tell John that they were your best friend and you was skipping me and you should never part? You was doing the color purple. I didn't tell you I was doing the color purple. I just said that they were instrumental, because people often talk about feminism and don't talk about how these part of feminism was the abolitionist movement and the feminist movement, as we just wrote. They came up in the same space, in the very same space. It is general that huh? John, you think for start sometime with the typing, me can't take it typing. Let me go, y'all. I gotta go mix some food. We'll come back, because now the story going all the way left field. Again, give me some, not just some random names, but some sources. Give me what y'all calling, what Taharazad said is the European stuff, so we can go substantiate the story. Because again, the story is being repackaged to give a different point of view, which it's not necessarily based all the way in reality. This wasn't about emotion. See, and I'll leave with this. Them feminists hated Black women. They didn't say anything about men testing the first abortions. Again, what they call this again? What they call this one again? Red herrings. Just throwing everything. John, when the gumbo I go finish? This is nothing but throwing everything in the pot, John. I'm not saying all of these things are not relevant. I'm saying it's not relevant to the point that's being made right now. We're talking about fact versus feelings. We're talking about how they felt about you versus what they did. Somebody could hate you and still give you a loaf of bread. Somebody could hate you and still give you. You can be driving on the street and say you dislike a European person or dislike a whoever you say you like. And if the spirit come upon you and you give them, the feeling that you have does not negate the action of what you did, that you gave them some water, you gave them some bread, you showed them where to go. So the fact that they disliked in their thought process does not negate the assertion that they aided in protesting towards this thing. It doesn't, one, they're not mutually exclusive. They could have hate you and still protested. That's what I'm saying. Those are later. Susan B. Anthony and Margaret. I didn't mention Margaret Sanger. That's later. That's not even on the timeline. We're talking about, I just gave you a timeline. Go look up the Liberator. Let me put the link in the box, and then I'm gonna go. Yeah, John got me writing on. Let me look. Let me blame John. John, you got me writing all over my hand. The pen keep. Let me see. And then I'm gonna go for real, all the way for real. This magazine will give a good context to this conversation. Hold me, go press this thing now. To this conversation of slavery and abolition, right? There we go. There you go. I looked it up for you and I gave it to you. I gotta go now. Everybody, thank you for coming through. I'm not gonna come back through tonight because this was it. You don't know. And yeah. So that would be some good reading for us if we haven't done it already. So we could come back to this conversation and have an informed conversation and look at how this feminist movement and the abolitionist movement came up together. Like they went to elementary school together. They was in the same preschool, and how they began to split. But we cannot deny the fact that they were coming from the same basis. How about that? So with that said, everybody, thank you for tuning in. I pray everybody have a blessed day. I'm going to go do the thing now.